It's not like Dr. Peter Venkman of the Ghostbusters. His history was pretty much a thumbnail sketch. But the history of these people, of the Roosevelts, is you know, deep and well documented. And there's a lot to swallow and a lot to digest when you have a lot of responsibility. So you feel like you've got to get as much of a picture of them as you can. I think I've gotten it to where I'm doing the things that he did. He was a very charming person. He had the ability to charm people, not just charm legislators, but charm people. I mean, he got elected President of the United States 4 times. You know, that's some pretty extraordinary thing. He was elected 4 times, and you know, so he was able to convince people that he was legit, that he was on the level. He made people believe in him, and he got amazing things done. So, you know, to have a twinkle in your eye, you've got to be able to have a twinkle in your eye to get people to do what you want to do. It's amazing what he did, and he was very straightforward with them about, look, there's not going to, you know, and his people said, there's just not going to be pictures of him being carried around. There's not going to be pictures of him in his crutches or in his wheelchair. There's only a few pictures of him in that state that exist. They just don't exist. And that was the agreement he made with them, the understanding, in exchange for an openness.
Well, I've always had a deep fascination with the Roosevelts, particularly Eleanor Roosevelt. And I love Hyde Park. I've visited many, many times. I love it there. So I've always been interested in that, and also that era, that period of time. So I was just so curious when the script came along, and then knowing nothing about Daisy Suckley, absolutely nothing, and learning about that, you know, pocket of information that had been completely hidden for so long. I just found the whole thing kind of interesting. The heart of the story is the event of the royals coming to the United States, and it was something that I had never thought about either. It was the first time that royalty had ever stepped foot in the United States. So that's a big deal, given our 2 countries' histories. He understands actors in a way that most directors don't. And I've never had such good notes from a director when I was working. I've never had that. I've also never, he's so good about when watching a take, he literally takes notes and comes to you with notes that have been written down just on one take. And most directors don't do that.
The feeling in England at this point, in '39, before the fairly new king and his wife come over, is they really want the Americans on board on the set of the Second World War. And there's a lot of pressure on this young couple, really, to go and try and win over the Americans. And obviously, and there were lots of cruel remarks about the Queen being too round of figure compared to Wallis, you know, their American beautiful Wallis, compared to this British dumpy Queen that they all said. And she lost quite a lot of weight for the trip to try and endear herself to everybody. And they were very well briefed. They knew all of the politicians' names before they got here. So it was all eyes were on them. And the picnic was set up really very cleverly to show the American public that the King and Queen are just people and that we can all get on. And it worked beautifully. She's a lovely character, the more I find out about her. And during the Second World War was really the making of this couple. And apparently, you know, they had the line drawn into the bar, so they had the same water as everybody else during rations. It was freezing cold in the palace. They wanted to be, they never left. And the palace was hit 20-something times, I think. But they never left London, they never left where all the bombs were happening. And when they went to the East End and shook hands, I think they were the ones who introduced the sort of walkabout thing. So they also were very in tune with the people and how they wanted to try and find out how everyone was feeling. So a very popular couple, similarly. You know, FDR was a very popular leader. So bowled over with excitement about meeting Bill Murray. And in my way, I can't do cool. If I'm really excited, I go all gummy and grinny, and apparently that was fine for Bill Murray. So he doesn't seem to hate me. But he's just brilliant, and he's so much fun, and you hear bursts of music between when they're setting up for the next scene. So he brings along this huge stereo, plays music for everybody. I think he's just ordered 100 weight of donuts and things. He's just fun. He's a lovely presence. He keeps the whole thing bowling along.
The movie is about the weekend when the British royal family came out and became the first reigning British monarchs to set foot on American soil. And the weekend is seen through the eyes of the cousin of then President Franklin Roosevelt, who throws a light on the extraordinary domestic setup that the Roosevelts had at the time. I asked Richard, what does she need to be in this script? It seems to me she needs to be the opposite of the Queen. The point about Eleanor here is that she's informal and she won't kowtow to royal ritual, and she wanted to show the King and Queen what a sort of down-home country picnic was like in America.
The King and Queen of England are visiting Franklin Roosevelt's home in Hyde Park, the first visit of a reigning English monarch ever to the Western Hemisphere. A momentous occasion, and one full of meaning and importance. A young king and young queen have come to America to try to engage the help of the United States in what is perceived to be an imminent war for England, Britain with Germany. Bill, as an extraordinary actor with a huge range. I mean, anyone who's seen Lost in Translation, you see the depth of soul that he has. Moments in Groundhog Day where they're just very, very funny, but at the same time, that sense of loss and that sense of depth.
Well, as Jim Carter says in Romeo and Juliet, it's about this nurse. My part in it is to play Bertie, George VI, on the occasion of the first ever state visit to North America by a reigning British monarch, because they'd had that spot of bother 2 centuries earlier, and nobody'd gone back. So there's a lot of... we're on the eve of what turns out to be the Second World War, and Britain needs to know that it has an ally in America, and there are a lot of people in America who don't like Britain, particularly because Wallis Simpson, a twice divorced American heiress, has just forced the last king to abdicate in many British people's eyes. And we don't know how it's going to go. And we go to see Roosevelt for the weekend at his country cottage with his wife and mother and some other very strange people. And we do our best to try and get his support should the unthinkable happen, which of course it does. Roger's a very specific director with an amazing eye for detail. I mean, I direct a little on stage myself, and one of the things that actors say to you that makes you think you're not messing them around is you seem to know what you wanted. And you could certainly say that about Roger. But he's so attentive that when he gives you a note, you want to try it. And because we're not working on a television schedule, we might get 5 or 6 takes, maybe 8 or 9, rather than 1 or 2. So you often have a chance to hone or perfect something in ways that he likes, and then if he's got what he wants, he often gives you a chance just to mess it up at the end and just do something that's much freer. Also, there's something that Bill does that I really like on reverses that he was doing in our long scene the other day, where instead of just sort of sitting there and obediently saying the lines, he slightly altered them or played with them, which is throwing in a really good way, because when it comes to your close-up, you think, oh, this is the bit where I do this, and that's not really what happens. You should be reacting to what's happening in front of you. And because Bill was playing with his responses and adding little words and taking things away and slightly surprising me, it was much fresher, and I really liked that, and I thought, I must take that away, I'm going to use that. We met quite late, actually. We met in rehearsals, and she was coming from a job and I was coming from a job. I think it was a relationship that was really incredibly important to Bertie. Everybody who met her said how remarkable the Queen was at smiling, actually. She said, you know, she would smile, and Eleanor Roosevelt said she would smile at a crowd, and everybody in the crowd would think she was smiling just at them. Or she would wave, and you would think the wave was meant for you. That's quite a trick. I mean, it may be a trick, but obviously she had something, you know, even though when she went there was this terrible article, this Scrivener's article, which I've read and is very hard-hitting for a queen in a new country, saying she's a tad overweight, and you know, if you were trying to choose two people to sell the idea of the monarchy to the American people, the King and Queen of England are the two last people you would choose. I mean, really kind of horrible stuff, bad press. And they made the mistake of reading their own reviews, which can't have been a good idea, just before opening night, as it were. But I think she's a brilliantly funny and truthful actor, and you know, I've admired her work enormously, and she's delightful to work with. There's this thing of the two of them sort of rather like Roosevelt and Bertie, actually, the two of them being kind of limping weirdies who go off into the sunset together, but happy in their own marriage. I think they were very much sustained by the children they'd managed to bring up. I think family was it was the beginning of the idea of the royal family as family, rather than as status symbols or figureheads. And because they'd had this childhood where the kids didn't think they were going to be queen, or Elizabeth didn't, then they'd had a really nice life. You know, lots of dogs, lots of exercise, not too much schooling, and I think, you know, there's that sort of simple straightforwardness about Olivia's performance which is so touching. I think she's got her to a T.
It's a story about Daisy and her odd relationship with the most powerful man in the world, and it's a story about a royal couple, you know, and their difficulties and their challenges and their bravery and their fears. And I responded to both bits of the story, but like a sort of Battenberg cake, it was like two stories in one, but forged together wonderfully. Bill took this part with appropriate gravity and seriousness, and he was scared enough by it, I think, to realise that he wasn't going to, nor did he want to, just show up and do another Bill Murray turn. It's not like a bit of Bill Murray. It's more foreign from him than that. And so he spent a lot of time working on the look, working on how to walk with polio, working on how to speak with a version of Roosevelt's voice. And the result is wonderful and surprising.